The video game industry has a long history of using Easter eggs to both congratulate and unnerve curious players. Some are as legendary as the cow level, or as heartwarming as Dan Johnson, but others seem to exist only to scare players who decide to play games at the right time. A lot of the time these Easter eggs don't go anywhere. They're a fleeting moment with no real conclusion, and that's part of the reason why they're scary. They come and go so quickly that it leaves the player thinking, did that really happen? But other times, these Easter eggs can take on a life of their own, either by becoming a big part of the community or in the actual games themselves. Some send players on wild goose chases, and others might get you a unique item, but others transcend just that. Back in 2008, nobody could have predicted that an Easter egg slipped into an up-and-coming franchise would end up becoming one of the biggest selling points in the franchise's history. And all of it was born from some bored developers and asset flipping. Today, in the spirit of October, we're looking at Call of Duty World at War. But more specifically, we're talking about the game mode that it hid behind the curtains. I am of course talking about Call of Duty Nazi Zombies. Before we get into the origins of the game mode itself, it's important to talk about the series as a whole. Nowadays, there's an air of elitism surrounding conversations on Call of Duty, often dismissing it as a normie game. But that view was nowhere to be found back in 2008. What started as a relatively successful World War shooter was transformed into a franchise that consistently had the highest selling games every year. While previous games were successful, none of them quite hit the sales or influence that Modern Warfare did. Modern Warfare completely changed the FPS market, and Activision had to make sure they kept this success going. While Infinity Ward looked ahead to 2009, Treyarch were busy making the series' 2008 entry, World at War. Unlike Infinity Ward, they were sticking to the franchise's roots and making a World War II story, which would be Call of Duty's last World War II game for a long time. Treyarch had a massive job. Not only did they have to follow up on Modern Warfare, but they also had the expectation of being the best-selling game of the year. When you think about it, Zombies doesn't really fit with the Call of Duty brand. Hell, it doesn't even fit with World at War. Modern Warfare told a story about nuclear war and the impacts of it, and World at War starts off with an American getting his eye gouged out in a POW camp. Call of Duty was trying to be gritty and realistic, so when a couple of developers were working on a horde mode behind the scenes, Activision got a little bit worried. Mark Lamia, who had been with the Call of Duty franchise from the beginning, became the chairperson of Treyarch in 2008. At this point, Treyarch were working on World at War, 007 Quantum of Solace, and Spider-Man Web of Shadows, and were only 2 years into a merge with a studio called Grey Matter. In an interview with Polygon, Dan Bunting, current co-studio head at Treyarch, describes one of the most important reasons for World at War's problematic development, the new engine. This was Treyarch's first work on the IIII engine, used in Infinity Ward's Call of Duty 2 and Modern Warfare. The first year was like taking a car engine apart. All the pieces were laying on the floor, and then we had to put it back together, so you could actually play it. The reason for ripping the engine apart was in order to support cooperative play, both in the campaign and online, a first for Call of Duty. While building the infrastructure, a small group of devs began working on a side project, led by Jesse Schneider. The original plan, as Jesse puts it, was to have an after-credits scene where the player would be on a mounted machine gun, and for the first time in the campaign, they'd be playing as a German. The player would realize that they were actually on Normandy Beach, and they have to gun down never-ending Allied troops until they're eventually overrun and killed themselves. Internally, the idea was scrapped because nobody felt comfortable making the players play as a German soldier, so it was replaced with another idea. In this one, the player would run through levels of the campaign encountering countless waves of enemies, and sometimes they would run into a boss fight. But as Schneider puts it, it was missing the core fundamentals of what makes a good tower defense game. Unwilling to let it go, Schneider decided to go and make a very rough version of his idea in one weekend, but it was still missing a lot of polish. During final mocapping sessions, the actors were doing a scene where Japanese soldiers were reeling from the aftermath of a bombing by the US. The shambling, distraught Japanese soldiers were perfect for the scene, but Schneider saw something else in it. Once these animations were implemented into his already built prototype, it began to take shape. At this point, the heads at Activision began to hear about the side project and take notice. When Lamia heard about the project and how many members of the team were starting to help out, despite the game being behind schedule, he began to worry.
I remember the first time I heard about it, I was like, what?
His choice? Stop the development and redirect their efforts to finishing the main game, or allow it to develop and include it as part of the game. Once Lamia played it and realized how fun it was, he had made his decision.
The classic management thing, the right thing to do, the reasonable thing could have been to just insist that the team stop getting distracted, focus on delivering what we'd already signed up and that we were already behind on delivering. And there were some inside the leadership in the studio that I felt that I needed to do and make that decision right then, or totally jeopardize the development in what certainly would have probably been one of the biggest mistakes of my career. Fortunately, I calmed down just enough to play it before I make a decision. These guys have made something, let's play it. I don't want to make a decision purely based on emotion, as insane as it sounds. And it didn't take me long to see why everyone was so excited about it. It was really easy to get into. It beautifully leveraged the core gameplay and shooter mechanics. And the skill-based design, it begged you to play it again, yet again, because after you were done playing, you were sure if you played it again, you can get to that next level, which of course I was sure I could after playing it. And it was the most fun I had playing co-op in the game that we were already making.
Instead of cancelling it, Schneider says that the original bunker defense mode was cancelled, and the few workers assigned to that were redirected to zombies instead. However, it was still strictly worked on in spare time, as the game studio was in full crunch for the main game. After this, it was a case of convincing Activision to let them put something this clearly off-brand into their game. Thankfully for Treyarch, once word spread around the office and everybody got a chance to play it, it turned out that everybody loved it, and they were allowed to continue development on the mode. The true issue came down to how to market the game mode. Unbeknownst to anybody at the time, this decision would be the final secret ingredient for Call of Duty Zombies' success.
The reason for this is that I think by making it a truly out-of-the-way experience that not everyone would get, but only making it an experience that the most committed, the faithful, who played through our entire campaign experienced first, they found it, they loved it. I mean, they'd already got what they bargained for. This wasn't marketed or PR. They played their Call of Duty campaign, and then they get this entirely new fun co-op gameplay experience afterwards. And the reaction was overwhelming. Fans around the world loved it. They embraced it. I mean, they embraced it as their own unique experience, and they weren't all bothered that they got all this extra content after they finished their Call of Duty campaign.
The development of Zombies shouldn't have worked by all accounts, but as Lamia puts it best, it was an example of pure creativity and love from a team that felt very constrained. Schneider especially highlights the feeling of joy the staff themselves felt from the game mode. By this point in the project, the team was mainly bug fixing and content locked. So everywhere you went in the office, you'd see people playing Nazi zombies. You could hear them across the office, yelling at each other for revives, talking trash about what levels they got to, and how far. Nazi zombies was the buzz of the office. Everyone wanted to chip in, from coders and model designers to the sound designers. One of these members, Kevin Sherwood, was especially excited about the game mode, and wanted to add his own special spin on it.
It was when you would die, and then the camera would pan over the map for Nachter and Toten, that I thought, I have a chord progression that would be perfect for this, and went home and wrote it, and we recorded it and threw it in the game, and that became Lullaby for a Dead Man, which was the first zombie song.
In the end, Zombies would get on the disc as a secret unlockable after the campaign, and this cobbled together mode would go down in history as one of the greatest innovations in the Call of Duty franchise. After finishing the final mission of the World at War campaign and letting the credits roll all the way to the end, a video begins playing. The footage is of a man on the ground, clearly in distress, while his vision comes and goes, followed by the appearance of silhouettes and a zombie running straight at the camera. This was everyone's first exposure to Nazi zombies. Without any trailers, coverage, or even a mention on the box, players discovered the game mode in the most organic way possible. The mode was not unlike schoolyard rumors of Mew and Pokemon Red, except this time when you used strength on the truck, it was actually real. The first map, Nachter and Toten, was a simple idea. Defend against waves of the undead in a bunker either solo or up to 4-player co-op. The map would establish the very basic rules of zombies. Killing zombies gets you points, which you can use to buy guns straight off the wall, or you can gamble your points in the random weapon box for a bigger selection, including special weapons like the ray gun, which perfectly encapsulates the mode's campy nature. The rooms are blocked by doors which you use the same points to open, and zombies can break in through multiple entries, which can be repaired to slow them down. While these core fundamentals will stay the same, the map is very clearly a prototype. The player characters were all generic marine models, and since the mode had no budget, it had no dialogue or any semblance of a story. However, it had one major thing going for it: mystery. Unknowingly, the lack of marketing for zombies was its biggest asset, as players saw it as a challenge to dig in and find everything that was in the game mode, even if there was nothing to find. As Lamia puts it, they weren't on social media at the time, and they still heard the outcry, which meant it had to be massive. This developer and consumer dialogue led to Treyarch taking full advantage of a fairly new practice in the video game industry: downloadable content. Modern Warfare had already had success by releasing one map pack after release, and Treyarch intended to take this idea one step further by releasing 4 packs. The original idea was to release 4 multiplayer maps in each pack, but after the huge success of Noct, they decided to run with it. Each pack would contain 3 multiplayer levels and 1 new zombies map. However, due to the release of Modern Warfare 2 being so close to the estimated release date of the 4th pack, it was cancelled and shifted over to Black Ops 1. Nazi Zombies was a confluence of events that turned it from a small Easter egg into a beast of its own. Noct showed the promise of an amazing game mode, and if that's what they could do on no plan or budget, then they had no idea what they could do once it was greenlit. Zombies fans wanted mystery. They wanted to pick everything apart and find everything for themselves, and this inspired a dialogue that still exists between Treyarch and its fans today. With 3 maps to release over the course of a year, Treyarch would create new story and lore, watch how the fans responded to said lore, and then respond to that in kind with the next map. This was all on top of a game mode that was just damn fun to play. So when Treyarch began working on their first map pack, they realized it was time to go big or go home. If Noct laid the foundation for zombies, then Verruckt was responsible for giving it nuance. While Verruckt was still based on a multiplayer map, this time Asylum, it was much more ambitious than Noct. For one, Noct's 3 rooms and 3 barriers had now been tripled, making Verruckt a much bigger map to explore. Another new addition was the Perky machines, a mechanic that made surviving to higher rounds a lot easier. You've also got the first appearance of the power switch and the teddy bear, which causes the mystery box to move to different sections of the map. In Noct, you were able to comfortably sit in a corner and mow down enemies, but Verruckt made sure you were constantly moving. Another mechanic, which would never return yet made Verruckt stand out even more from Noct, was splitting the players up in the starting room. Players had to work their way around to the power room in order to meet in the middle, meaning each side of the map contained completely different weapons, layouts, and strategies that different groups of players were forced to use before meeting up with the others. The zombie AI was heavily improved, and was made even stronger by giving them the ability to double hit the player. While this was used to balance out the appearance of Juggernog, it also makes Verruckt one of the hardest maps to survive in. However, you have more choices now, with the first appearance of the Electroshock Barrier, which costs points to activate and gives the player some breathing room in a pinch. Almost everything introduced in Verruckt would stay with the franchise for the foreseeable future, and while none of the other maps introduced quite as many new gameplay mechanics as Verruckt, each one would add something new to shake up the formula. Most importantly for me, Verruckt was the start of something much greater. The first major improvement was making the playable cast actual characters this time around, giving them unique voice lines and interactions.
There's gotta be a power switch around here somewhere!
The story, on the other hand, was still yet to be seen. There's no real plot to Verruckt. The characters are unnamed originally, but it does set up some things that will become important later. A German asylum which seemed to be partaking in experiments, a teddy bear with a mysterious laugh, and the announcer voice accompanying the power-ups.
Popped his head like a melon! Stay dead!
I want to take a quick divergence here because I know somebody is commenting right now telling me about the plot of Verruckt. It's true that Treyarch would give these characters names and goals, but all of that came after World at War in the later sequels. For the sake of this video, I only want to look at things that World at War included in its map packs, because it highlights the transformative nature of this story. Anyways, back to Verruckt. Here's what we know about Verruckt. 4 American soldiers are in a German asylum that has been overrun by hordes of the undead. While they talk a lot, none of them seem to mention why they're here, how they got here, or what their plan is, so we can't tell a lot from just their appearance. However, that's not to say Verruckt has nothing going for it, as a collage of scribbles appear all over the map. While each of these symbols and numbers correspond to different things, I want to highlight two in particular, 19382406 and 9:21. The first set appears to be a date, June 24th, 1938, which corresponds with a real-life event when a meteor exploded above Chicora, Pennsylvania in the States. The second number, 921, probably refers to Jeremiah 9:21, which states, "Death has climbed in through our windows and has entered our fortresses. It has removed the children from the streets and young men from public squares." While the Bible verse speaks for itself, the meteor crash is far more interesting. The meteor exploded 12 miles above the surface, and only 2 shards of the rock were ever discovered. For those of you who have never played zombies or maybe weren't around for the beginning of the game mode, you might think that fans were being crazy and just reading into things that weren't there, and then Treyarch were responding to that. But that wouldn't be entirely correct. Almost a month after the release of Verruckt, Treyarch sound designer Brian Toohey had a lot to say about the map on his blog. What relevance do the numbers have on the walls in Asylum? Is that a Bible verse on the wall? Do these squiggles mean anything? Treyarch were very clearly putting these little messages into the game to get players' imaginations going, and while they may not have expected every single clue to be found, they severely underestimated the strength of this community. Verruckt was also the map that really solidified Kevin Sherwood as a key component of zombies. The ending piece, which he made for Noct, was only a short melody, but the audio director Brian Toohey convinced him to take it one step further. So they would compose a full version of Lullaby for a Dead Man, complete with vocals provided by Elena Siegman. Siegman has her own development history, having produced on Guitar Hero 2 and Rock the 80s. She was working as a producer on Quantum of Solace at the time of World of War's development, so when Kevin found out she was a singer, he asked her to come and perform his new song. Thus, the first Zombies song was truly born. After this, they decided to place the song in Verruckt as an Easter egg. If the player flushed a toilet 3 times, they would be able to listen to the song as they played. This simple idea became a staple for the Zombies formula. The Game Over song of the current map becomes an Easter egg in the subsequent map. Even though they didn't tell anyone what to do, fans discovered the Easter egg within 2 weeks, much to their surprise. Verruckt proved that Treyarch were willing to go places with this game's story, and the fan response proved that it was a two-way street. They would have to step up their game for their next map pack, and boy did they. While Shin Onuma may not have changed the gameplay up as much as Verruckt, it did add a lot of new features that made it a worthy successor. This time, the circular, claustrophobic layout of the Asylum was replaced with the open-ended Japanese swamp. The map consisted of a small hub similar in size to Noct. However, the players could unlock other areas that branched out into smaller huts. They could walk on foot to these huts or pay to take the zipline across, if they needed to get away from a swarm of enemies. Unlike most maps after Verruckt, she didn't have a power switch, meaning electric barriers and the new trap, the Flogger, could be activated at any time. Instead of the power activating the perks, each perk will randomly spawn in one of the 4 huts at the end of each exit, meaning it can take multiple rounds before players can find the essential Juggernog needed to survive to high rounds. Another major addition was the newest wonder weapon, the Wunderwaffe DG2, a chain lightning gun which made clearing entire hordes extremely easy. However, its low ammo count and the ability to hit the person using it makes this extremely powerful weapon well balanced. The final new addition are the Hellhound Enemies, which will spawn by themselves every 6 or so rounds, and then eventually spawn with normal enemies on higher levels. The zombie AI in She was much more forgiving than Verruckt, and the much bigger rooms meant that it was harder to be cornered and overrun. Shin Onuma was an extremely fun map, but the biggest reason for why it was so fun was in the new cast of characters.
I have one badass killing machine!
The Marines from Verruckt have been replaced by 4 new characters, each one representing a different faction of World War II, in their most stereotypical forms possible. We've got the overly macho, war-loving Tank Dempsey, the honorable samurai Takeo Misaki, the vodka-swilling, wife-murdering Nikolai Belinsky, and finally the torturous and completely insane Dr. Edvard Richthofen. These 4 would remain with the zombie story all the way up to Black Ops 3, and there's a very good reason for it. Everything from their individual dialogue, their character interactions, and their over-the-top stereotypes make them a blast to play as.
The doctor is not impressed, Yankee Joe.
Unlike the Marines, which mainly shouted commands at each other, each of these members clearly have alliances, and it gives the mode that extra feeling of being stuck in a situation where unlikely allies have to join together to fight a common enemy.
Takio, you keep shooting like that and you'll be as badass as me one day!
Outside of giving the mode some well-needed levity, they also do an excellent job of advancing the plot. If Verruckt is where the gameplay of zombies got good, then Shinonuma is where the story really gets going. Verruckt had some cryptic messages, but she managed to take it one step further by not only having more cryptic messages, but also just some straight up story. One of the first things players notice when they spawn into Shi is the body of a soldier directly above them. It's impossible to tell who it is at first, but we can assume he's an American soldier, and if you look at him close enough, you can see that he's not actually hanging by his neck, but instead stuck on a parachute. The group can find a number of messages strewn across the map in the form of papers, one of them reading Die Glock and Der Ries, which mean the bell and the giant in German respectively. More importantly than written notes was what the characters had to say. Outside the main hut, the characters can see a giant red rock which seems to be coursing with some sort of electricity and giving off a strange noise. Each of the characters question what it could be, or if it has anything to do with the zombie outbreak.
I wonder if that rock brought those freak bags.
Everyone except for Richtofen.
Rock must be the element 115 comes from.
Arguably the most important piece comes from a radio in the starting room. Activating it plays a message which seems to be a transmission from an American soldier to another.
R-4808N 371406 115 4840.
I hope you're receiving this transmission, Peter. If you are not, then all is already lost. You must know by now that we failed to contain the asylum, and that we had to move the experiment here. Location. The numbers will guide you. The giant must remain at all costs. Repeat, Der Ries must remain safe at all costs. The DG2 experiments continue. Might be our only advantage now. Find Dr. Vitov and Dr. Max's. Only they may know what's going on. The use of 115 is dangerous at best. I'm not sure how long we can continue here. We've lost most of our best people. I hope you get this. I hope it hasn't happened there too. But I'm almost out of hope.
6054 06.96 101 55 44.94.
This isn't the only playable radio, however it does have the most plot in it. In the doctor's quarters you can find a radio which plays creepy sound effects, and a whispery voice which seems to say Element 115 and find Dr. Richtofen. Another radio, this time in the storage hut, plays a very interesting piece. Most of the audio is zombies screaming and gunshots, but there are parts where you can hear American soldiers calling to each other for help. More than likely, these are the Marines in Verruckt, although since the radio doesn't tell us if they lived or died, there's not much help here. Even if Treyarch didn't expect players to find this stuff immediately, they definitely knew people would be checking each and every spot in detail, which is why they added moments like this to catch players who were just pressing the action button on every item. Once again in the doctor's quarters we've got even more notes, one of which reads, "It could be used to power HARP," presumably referring to Element 115. Of course we have to mention the music Easter egg, this time activated by ringing a phone in the communications hut. While Lullaby for a Dead Man was a good song, the one took the tone to much darker places, with by far the edgiest lyrics to this point.
Shit! I think its skull just hit next week!
This was also just what was found in the playable area. Treyarch knew that players would check every single nook and cranny of the map, even if it meant using no-clip exploits to do it. So they left a few extra hints out of bounds where only some players would find them. In one of the huts outside the starting room, the word Tunguska is written on the wall in chalk. The hanging body also has some special properties that most players will never see. If you manage to knock him down and attack his body enough, the player will be automatically killed. So let's get all of these straight. We visited 2 areas now where zombies are being experimented on, first in Germany and now in Japan. We've got multiple mentions of something called Der Riese and the number 115, which Richtofen confirms is an element. We also know that the Americans were involved in the experiments, and that Dr. Richtofen and a man named Dr. Maxis are very important. Before we get into the final map, I want to take a quick divergence to fill in some real-world inspirations. There are a lot of references to real-life events in this game's story, some of which are actual events and other fall more into conspiracy thought. Firstly, we already talked about the Chikura meteorite from Verruckt, but she references its own meteor. The Tunguska Event in 1908 is the largest impact event ever recorded in human history, where a meteor entered the Earth's atmosphere over a sparsely populated area in Russia. So we've got references to at least 2 meteor events, and a 3rd meteor which can be found in the swamp in Shinonuma, which seems to be the source of element 115. To reinforce the idea that the zombie pandemic is extraterrestrial, you need look no further than element 115 itself. For those of you who have better things to do than read about aliens, you probably never heard of element 115 before this game. 115, known by its official name Moscovium, is an element discovered back in 2003, but way before then it had a much different connotation. Back in the 80s, conspiracy theorist Bob Lazar claimed that the Americans were given element 115 by aliens from the Zeta Reticuli system, and that it was used to power UFOs. These supposed experiments were carried out where else but Area 51. Sure, Lazar may have lied about his qualifications and was arrested in 1990 for being part of a prostitute ring, but his impact on science fiction is still undoubtable. Element 115 has appeared in games like XCOM, and there's even an X-Files episode where they reference it in relation to alien UFO technology, so even though he was a complete crazed lunatic, he started this trend. How about that message that referred to something called HARP? Otherwise known as the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, it was essentially a program to increase radio communications in the atmosphere. But that hasn't stopped conspiracy theorists from getting their grubby little hands all over it, claiming that HARP is a method of weaponizing the weather so that Americans can cause events such as floods anywhere in the world. Of course, it's probably all nonsense, but the mention of HARP in the story shows that Treyarch were well aware of the conspiracies around the time. More than just alien lore, the whole concept of Nazi zombies isn't necessarily as far-fetched as you might initially think. Most people's first exposure to Nazis and the occult would have been Raiders of the Lost Ark, and while none of that technically happened, it does have some historical basis. While there's no proof they ever attempted to raise the dead, they were working on some crazy shit. The Wunderwaffe DG2 is a reference to these so-called miracle weapons that the Nazis were developing. Some were successful, like the STG-44. Others were absolutely bonkers, like the Sun Gun, which was a mirror satellite that they were planning on using to focus the sun's rays to destroy their enemies. Who would have thought the Nazis were actually kinda crazy? In case you still don't think Treyarch knew any of this, how about those 2 phrases that appeared in Shinonuma, Die Glock and Der Riese? Well, Project Riese was the name given to a number of secret underground research facilities, which the Nazis were using to research their Wunderwaffe. One of the conspiracies surrounding Project Riese was a supposed weapon called Die Glock, which was a giant bell-shaped structure which apparently had the powers to see into the past. All of these little pieces show that Treyarch knew exactly what they were doing, and they were laying the groundwork for their final map. And oh boy, would it be a hell of a finale. The giant is rising. Face the might of the Nazi zombies in their heartland. This is where it all began. This is where the master plan took shape. Is this where it all ends? Is the description for what would become one of the most fondly remembered maps in zombies history. Der Riese was a culmination of everything zombies was about. The story got bigger, the map was tightly designed, and the gameplay took another massive step forward. If Noct laid the groundwork, Verruckt added the nuance, and she gave us a story, then Der Riese took all of these parts and perfected them. The map takes place in a German research facility, a sprawling area that combines the split paths of Xi, but also the circular nature of Verruckt. In the beginning, you've got only 2 paths to go down, but once you turn the power on and open up some more doors, the map opens up even more than before. Speaking of the power, Darice is hiding a new gameplay mechanic under its sleeve, this time in the form of the teleporters. While Xi had the zipline connecting 2 parts of the map, the teleporters were far more useful, having 1 in each corner. This means that if you're in a bad situation and you need to get out of it, you're almost guaranteed to be near a teleporter at any given time. And for a measly 1500 points, you can be teleported back to the starting room and receive a free power-up. She had this problem where there were a lot of places to go but only 1 entrance, which meant that getting overrun was really easy, but the teleporters fixed this problem. In order to use the teleporters, the player had to turn on the power and then link them to the mainframe, by activating the machines and then running back to the spawn room to activate the mainframe. Once all 3 are linked, the player receives their ultimate prize, the Pack-a-Punch machine. For 5,000 points, the player can upgrade any of their guns, although you will have to wait for the machine to do its thing, making it extremely risky in the middle of a round. Not only do the guns get stronger, faster, and have more ammo, some will behave differently. For example, pack-a-punching the Colt you start with gives it explosive rounds. This made the meta a lot more fluid, since before this there were some weapons that were just completely useless after a certain round, but now you can actually make those weapons viable for a price.
So now, rather than opening up the mystery box and you get a Kar 98 and you go, what the hell is this? I don't want a bolt action rifle. Well, now you actually might want to take that, go right to the Pack-a-Punch machine and see exactly what that gun does now that it's been powered up.
The final new gameplay addition comes in the random weapons box, and much like the Pack-a-Punch, would stay with zombies for a long time. The Monkey Bomb is a special wonder weapon that you can throw like a grenade. It attracts zombies for an amount of time and then explodes, and even if it doesn't kill all of the enemies, it does give you a chance to get out of sticky situations or buy yourself time to upgrade your weapons. The Monkey Bomb would return in most maps, and anytime it doesn't return, it's replaced by a similar weapon such as the Gersh device. Darice added so many things to the zombies formula that I haven't even mentioned yet, like the Bowie knife, which lets you upgrade your melee attack, or the new power-up Carpenter, which automatically repairs all the barricades in the map. Treyarch went all out on the gameplay this time, which is probably why Darice is such a fan-favorite map. Not only did it return in Black Ops and Black Ops 3 with all the other maps, in Black Ops 3 specifically it was sold separately, because Treyarch knew that people would want to buy Darice by itself. Beyond the gameplay, the real meat in Darice is in its story. Being the culmination of every individual hint that we've received from other maps, all the threads will become clear, right? To start, let's get everything out on the table. Darice has a total of 7 recordings which can be found scattered around the map, all telling the story of the experiments that took place in the facility. In them we hear from multiple characters, mainly Dr. Maxis and our good friend Verruckt. The story is as follows. Maxis was the head of research at Darice, where they were exploring the effects of 115 and how to apply them to the war efforts. He created the Wunderwaffe along with Verruckt, and the teleporters and Pack-a-Punch machine, which are all powered by 115.
Work on the matter transference has, however, come to a standstill. We simply do not have enough element 115 to continue the experiments.
While the teleportation seemed to work, it turned everyone who came out on the other side into zombies, and Maxis quickly learned that he was unable to control them.
It's all right. Stay there. Calm down. I order you. Kill it. Bring me another.
After this, we hear a new voice, Maxis' daughter Samantha. He gives her a puppy, which she names Fluffy, and he rather ominously suggests that she's going to have puppies.
You know she's going to have puppies.
Really? Can I keep the puppies too, Father?
We'll see, Samantha. One step at a time.
The final experiment involved placing Fluffy into the teleporter, which created the Hellhounds that have been appearing since Xi. Once Sam discovers this, she runs into the teleporter and tries to save Fluffy. When Maxis attempts to get his daughter out, Verruckt betrays them, shutting the door and activating the teleporter.
Come back here, Samantha! Stop her! Gently, Samantha. That's not Flossie anymore. We must get out of here. What? Edward, what are you doing? Open the door!
I'm scared.
Don't go. Stay by me, Samantha.
Goodbye, Dr. Maxis.
The final chronological recording shows a man activating an emergency mechanism, presumably due to a zombie outbreak, and the radio ends with the facility being overrun.
Warning, the shield is now active.
Damn it! I can't find my pills.
Materials and report to the barracks.
They are coming.
It's not a drill.
I must do what I must do.
The shield is now active.
God forgive us all.
To destroy the shield is now active. Scientists to destroy the materials and report to the barracks.
There's a lot going on in these radios, and a lot of it was foreshadowed in She. The whole facility, along with Maxis and Richtofen's involvement, and another mention of Area 51, all tie back into the previous map. While Doris is the first map to tell a real story with a beginning, middle, and end in the form of radios, it also has a lot of hidden messages that reinforces things that we've been seeing since Verruckt. Let's start with the numbers 935. Outside of the map, a book can be found that seems to be a welcome letter from Dr. Maxis to something called Group 935. While it doesn't explain what their experiments are or who the members are, we can deduce that it must be the efforts of multiple countries, due to this one line where he states, "No further contact with your governments." The monkey bomb holds a ton of secrets in this map, but two of them are particularly important. First of all, when winding the weapon, it will sometimes say, "You're not Sam!" before being thrown. Second, if you take the monkey bomb to the furnace near Teleporter B, you get this Easter egg. Moving on, we've got a pretty interesting game, but not exactly the most plot relevant. If you shoot a pack-a-punched weapon at this part of the map, you'll receive a special announcer asking to play hide and seek.
I want to play a game. Let's play hide and seek.
The player has to find 3 items that have spawned around the map, and once they do, the announcer once again switches to a demonic voice. There are tons of hidden notes and messages scrawled around the map, some of which are flavor text, while others lead to more. The chalkboards in the animal testing lab all have different messages among the formulas and equations. The main 3 are "Why won't it work?", "Edward, I know it was you", and "Hyena". Another special note is hidden in the furnace room, which is only revealed if you hold the action button on a specific brick on the floor. This note reads, "Side effects of using 115. The power is undeniable, but who can use such weapons without themselves turning?" Let's put back on our tinfoil hats for a second and talk about some more real-life connections. If you thought alien conspiracy theories were the only thing Treyarch were reading, then you might have been wrong. In Shin Onuma, Richtofen has a couple of lines where he mentions a certain clandestine group.
The Illuminati will be pleased with you, Nikolai.
However, it was hard to tell at the time whether he was actually serious about this group, or if they were the ramblings of a clearly insane man. For those of you who somehow don't know, the Illuminati is one of the most popular conspiracy theories out there, purporting that a single group of individuals run the world. They supposedly place hidden messages in music and media to brainwash people, and while most people agree that it's probably just a big elaborate ruse, some genuinely believe in it. In Zombies, however, they play a much bigger role than just a brief cameo. Remember the writing on the walls in Verruckt? Well, there was a little more to that than I originally told you. This one specific section, which looks like random images, is actually an Illuminati cipher, which when translated reads "Living Dead". Definitely not important, but what it does establish is a precedent. The Illuminati are somehow involved, and this cipher is important. Jump forward to Doris, and we've got tons of Illuminati codes. In order, they read, "Living Dead", "To faithful servant, the seed has been planted. Observe and report. Maxis must not know. Edward, it's time. Kill Maxis." So now we know that Richtofen was actually receiving messages from the Illuminati, which he hid around Doris, presumably because they wanted access to Glock and the other wonder weapons. Finally, we've got the music Easter egg, Beauty of Annihilation, my personal favorite World at War Zombies song. This one is activated by finding 3 glowing jars of brains around the map, and is based on the Game Over song from She. While Lullaby and 1 were good at being atmospheric, Beauty does an excellent job of getting you in the mood to slay hordes of zombies. Treyarch packed so much into this map that they even foreshadowed most of the events of Black Ops 1, even going as far as Moon. There are a number of boards around the map, each of which have an array of photographs on them. While they can be hard to see, they seem to be concept art for different enemies like the Hellhounds, and new maps. You've got images from Kino der Toten, Ascension, and Call of the Dead, along with another image of a zombie in front of the Eiffel Tower. That final one is interesting because it was originally meant to be in Black Ops 1, but it ended up being scrapped and turned into Moon, backed up by the fact that Moon's console name is zombie_Paris. However, that doesn't mean Moon comes completely out of left field either. If you look closely at the moon in Derice, you can actually see a ring of lights. Presumably this is foreshadowing Griffin Station, which wouldn't appear until the final map of Black Ops. So where does this leave us? What does it actually mean? Let's try to put all this information together and give a clear version of World at War's zombie story. In the years before World War II, 3 meteorites crash-landed on Earth. The first was in Tunguska, Russia in 1908, the second was in Chikura, Pennsylvania in 1938, and the third landed in a swamp in Japan. Out of the meteors came a strange element named 115, which countries began experimenting with. The Americans used Area 51 as their test site. Meanwhile, a group was forming in Germany. Group 935 was created to research 115, and they had research facilities all over the world, including an asylum in Germany and the location of the meteor fall in Japan. However, their main base of operations was Derice. During the experiments, headed by Dr. Ludwig Maxis, they created weapons such as the ray gun, Wunderwaffe DG2, and monkey bombs, along with the teleporters codenamed D-Glock.
Anyone ever hear about Die Glock?
At some point, Maxis learned that exposing humans to 115 caused them to turn into zombies, which he attempted to control through experiments. Meanwhile, his assistant Edward Richthofen was communicating with a secret group known as the Illuminati. Their messages were sent in code and told him to observe and report at first, but after some time they began to become more pressing. In the end, Edward receives a message from the Illuminati which simply stated, "It's time, kill Maxis." During an experiment with animals, namely his daughter's dog Fluffy, Maxis created the first Hellhound, and when his daughter Samantha came in to stop him, Richthofen locked them both in the teleporter and left them to die. From here, the facilities around the world would become overrun. The asylum in Germany, the swamp in Japan, and Derice itself. While the fate of Dr. Maxis is unknown, one thing we do know is what happened to Sam. Due to the childlike voice of the announcer during hide and seek, and the zombies' tendency to say the name Sam during attacks, we can assume she somehow became linked to the zombies, making her the announcer controlling everything. Sam! Around this time, the Americans sent a man named Peter to the 935 site in Japan. They already knew that the asylum was a lost cause, but they still needed to save Derice, presumably because of the technology it contained. The Americans had no idea the Japanese site was just as bad. However, they had already lost men in the asylum and needed to contact Richthofen and Maxis. Unfortunately for them, Peter would never make it, after catching his parachute on the way down and dying before he could touch the ground again. And to make matters worse, Richthofen had already murdered Maxis, so their plan was an utter failure. In the end, they had failed to contain the zombie pandemic, and now the 4 protagonists come together for the first time. There's still a couple things we don't know, however. How did the gang get together? What were they doing in a 935 research facility in Japan? Outside of Richthofen, none of the others seem to know what's going on. Were they test subjects? How did they manage to get from Shinonuma to Derice if there's no teleporter in the swamp? All of these questions would be answered in later maps, but as of World at War, we didn't quite know. All that we had were vague theories. For all the hints and pieces Treyarch gave us, they never answered everything. And that was the appeal. For every answer we found, another question popped up, and the story of zombies would remain that way for almost 2 years, until the next map, Kino der Toten, arrived, and a new era of story hunting began. You know, one of the things that I kept coming back to while I was researching and reminiscing for this video was how this amazingly community-driven story is included in Call of Duty, a franchise that most people dismiss nowadays. Sure, there are good reasons to dismiss COD, and the zombie storyline does get a little silly later on, but it's sad that people don't give games like COD a chance anymore. Because if you go back and actually give zombies a chance, you'll find that it's not only an immensely fun experience, but also some of the best environmental storytelling that I've ever seen. There's a lot of things I just haven't had the chance to talk about in this video, like the sound design. Play any zombies map with a pair of headphones and just pay attention to how the game uses sound to mess with the player. Have you ever noticed that when you're looking through a barrier and have your back to a wide empty space, the game will play zombie sounds from that direction, even if there's nothing there? Or how about the general ambient noise that's always there, but can be hard to hear while being overrun by hordes of the undead? She was especially great at this. If you get a chance to just walk around the huts without any zombies, you'll hear just how much is going on in there, from women crying in the distance to dogs growling. Zombies is the perfect blend of everything. It's got the atmosphere of a survival horror, but the blood-pumping excitement of an arcade action game. It begs you to just try once more and get to a higher round, but playing the game solo can honestly be a frightening experience. But this is only World at War, and the zombie storyline would continue to span over 4 games and across 20 maps. While some might consider this video a bit redundant considering how much lore is both introduced and retconned in later maps, I don't really care about all that. What I am interested in is the passion of World at War, and the exponential increase of each of these maps. Zombies started as a small project that really should have been cancelled, and it ended up being one of the greatest selling points for Call of Duty. As Lamia puts it, cancelling zombies would have been the biggest mistake of his career. Innovation is important, and creativity breeds creativity. Without the mystery, the fan involvement, and the Easter egg hunting, zombies probably would have been remembered as a pretty neat Easter egg in a great World War II shooter. Instead, it completely changed Treyarch. They had found their voice, and they knew exactly where they wanted to go.
And this story, I don't think it would be complete if it weren't for the fact that zombies launched us into a world without borders with our fans. Absolutely. I mean, the conversation that we've learned to have with them continues to impact us to this day. Without them, zombies wouldn't exist as we know it, and we wouldn't have had the opportunity to make the games for them and craft the experiences that we do. And for that fact, we're eternally grateful to them. So to our fans around the world, we look forward to carrying on that conversation with you in the future. That is, if we haven't started already. Thank you.
So, this was a massive video. I've had this script kicking around for about a year now, but I decided that I would shelve it until October. And then I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do, and discovered it again, and was like, yeah, fuck it, I really like COD Zombies, why not talk about that for 50 minutes? The original plan was to do 2 videos, one being on the story of World at War, and then one being on the story of Black Ops 1. But originally I only wrote about 3,500 words on World at War, and then when I went to rewrite the script for this video, it ended up at like 8,500, so yeah, just one video this time. This is my single longest video to date, so if you managed to sit through the whole thing, then thank you so much, it means a lot to me. If you want to share this video with anybody, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe and all that crap. Usually I don't talk about things like Call of Duty, and I want to really break that stigma with this video, because to me, this story is one of the greatest things I've ever seen, and the fact that it's tied to Call of Duty means that some people just don't give it the chance, but that's what I really want to enforce. So yeah, while this wasn't the original plan for Halloween, I did have so much fun making this video, and I'm glad that I decided to make it instead of what I was going to make, which still might do soon, or maybe next year, I don't know. And hey, if everybody likes this video, maybe I'll do another one where I talk about Black Ops 1, and then Black Ops 2 and 3, where the real dumb shit is relevant. So, thank you again. I'm going to shut up now because this video is too long. If you want to join the Discord, join the description. It's a lot of shit posting. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Twitter, cicada_wave. And if you want to follow me on Twitch, I'm twitch.tv/cicadawave. So, yep, thank you again for watching. Enjoy Halloween night, enjoy Spooktober, and I'll see you when I see you. Thanks again.